I think when you're trying to build something that has never been built, or an innovation that you've discovered, or an idea that you believe could affect a number of people, and then you start to recruit a number of people, and then you're starting to have investors. You really have to be willing to go after it with every fiber that you can control.
Hello, friends. Before we get started today with an amazing guest, I wanted to take a quick minute to mention that we are going to be launching a new mastermind group this winter. We've had a ton of success with the first group, so decided to open the door to give another handful of participants the opportunity to experience the truly transformational experience of surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals who are invested in your success. So who is this group for? It's for entrepreneurial individuals who either have a business or would like to eventually launch one. It's for someone who is looking to surround themselves with a motivated team of supporters and advocates. It's for anyone who would like a quality dose of positive accountability in their life. And it's for people who like to help others achieve their dreams while chasing their own. And just as importantly, if not more so, who is this group not for? It's not for idea leeches who are looking to intercept somebody else's success. It's not for energy vampires who are going to bring down the overall enthusiasm of the group. And it is definitely not for anyone who is not willing to put in the hard work required to achieve their dreams. In the last year, we've seen members of our current group launch businesses, break company sales records, land their dream jobs, launch a podcast, and reach many other milestone achievements in their individual journeys. All of this while developing deep and meaningful relationships with the other members of the group. We've shared laughs, tears, moments of complete amazement. So if this is something you are looking to add into your life, please shoot me an email at brad@millennialmm.com with the subject line Mastermind Group, and we'll get you some additional information. All right, guys, enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. Today, we have the great pleasure to be joined by Rodney Williams. Rodney is the founder and CEO of Listener, an ultrasonic technology that sends data over inaudible audio. Rodney, welcome to the show, my friend. Excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into your journey because I think you have an interesting path where you had this great career. You're working at a large, well-known company, P&G, and you ended up giving that all up to move into more of an entrepreneurial journey that started with you or culminated with you founding Listener. So if you could, before we dive into Listener and what the company does and how you got involved in that, would you mind just going back in time a little bit and telling us what your life and career was like before starting Listener?
No, definitely. Honestly, sometimes you can notice the differences between the two, or sometimes you can just notice how similar they are. But I was in brand management at P&G, but I actually worked on a Pampers brand. And one of the things that I've just noticed later on is that all of the things that I think made me successful there is continuing to make me successful with Listener. And it takes time to actually be relevant, but the diligence that I learned there, I always was a thinker, trying to think about new ways that digital can connect to consumers completely. So, I wrote patents there. I tried to think outside the box about how could we address the ultimate problem of just selling more diapers, or more importantly, communicating the value of our product to the right consumer so that we could ultimately sell more. At the end of the day, I think as I've gone and led Listener, we're always addressing problems and trying to use technology that are within our grasp to effectively improve some part of a consumer's experience. So even though they seem so far away from each other, they're actually quite complementary.
I love that. So You're in brand management, working on the Pampers brand at P&G. What led to you making the jump and starting your own company, and how did the idea of Listener come about?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point at P&G, I had already kind of become seasoned in creating ideas and executing on it. So when I really started to dive into the potential of Listener was really behind just the inefficiencies on how we market to consumers, but how we connect to them, how we understand who they are. I used to always describe it as that, the majority of that spend for that commercial spot is to, imagine like a toothbrush commercial while you're, watching a football game. Now, the reality is that's only really relevant if you need a toothbrush, and it's only really relevant, and it may not ever be relevant during that, sporting game. But the way in which we market today, it's much more of a billboard than something personalized to me and my experiences, and when and where and how I actually use that product. And the biggest problem why we can't get that personal is not just data. It's actually the last mile or the last 3 yards. And it's really about understanding who that consumer is in real time by location and being able to interact with them in a way that completes the consumer journey.
So for somebody who's not familiar with the ability to send data through audio, and especially through ultrasonic audio, can you give a high-level explanation of how the technology works and some of the applications that it was developed for?
Yeah, 7 years in, it's much simpler. We're a wireless communication company. That's the easiest way I can describe this. We have continued to grow and innovate around using a spectrum of sound frequencies for our tunnel of wireless transmission. Every wireless transmission company in the world is focused on a frequency range, a bandwidth, or some protocol that they've created. Ours is focused within sound frequencies, and frequencies that are completely silent to humans, safe, but can be played and received by any standard speaker. So the advantages of our bandwidth allow us to be considered as sound. It's also allowed us to be just software, so no additional hardware is required. We can leverage any speaker or microphone to broadcast or receive. And then from an FCC standpoint, it's completely unregulated because it is in safe audio spectrum. Now, what we've done over time is as we're perfecting how we transmit data, we focus heavily on increasing the bandwidth and providing more security, providing more control. So, think of air-gapped scenarios of data transmission is where we really, really focus on. And when I mean air-gapped, I'm referring to, short-range distances, 3 to 5 feet of data transmission. And within that range, we really focused on security and data throughput. And last October, we had a significant jump. We essentially jumped 10x our bandwidth. And then this year, we added the ability to do, end-to-end encryption, semi-duplex, a handshake, many-to-many, one-to-one scenarios, and then the platform now can support anything. So where the most important part of any consumer journey is when you pay for something and when our clients need to understand who you are. And that's the area where we're focused and getting a lot of traction. So Listener is actually being positioned as the safest and most secure way to actually transmit payment credentials ever created. Now, because of some of the things that we've done, it is positioned to be a standard across payment ecosystems as a way to identify and authenticate. And then that combined with all of the other consumer journey things that we can do, it's going to be a fun ride as you continue to grow the technology.
So just to paint a little bit more of a picture around that for somebody who's not familiar at all with this technology like myself, Could you just give an example using that payment example that you just mentioned of how a consumer might be using that technology, whether or not they know it?
Well, the technology, and I'll give you specifics, right? And this is just a fun example, right? You go to your local coffee shop. Let's just say Starbucks. You go to Starbucks, you order ahead, and instead of walking up to the counter and giving them your name and looking for your coffee, the store automatically identifies that you've entered the store, and if you put your phone within 3 feet of the cash register, it will notify the attendant that you're there, so that she can give you your coffee. Or when you're ready you rung up some items, you get your drink, you get some chips or whatever, and you're ready to check out. There's a couple of things that have already been identified. The store knows that you're there. It knows your account information. In theory, you could just walk out. Now, maybe not. But instead of opening up your Starbucks app, scanning that barcode, again, imagine just putting your phone near that terminal within 12 inches, and that terminal is going to say, "Hello, Rodney. Thanks for your purchase," and you're going to walk out. Now, that's what we are doing. Now, in consumer, I always joke about this, could care less. For her or him, they've ordered their coffee. It's personalized when they go to pick it up, so they don't got to wait in line and deal with a task of picking up the wrong coffee. Or when they go on to checking out, they don't even have to open up the app again, right? It's a much more seamless experience. Now, the seamless experience that we're enabling is because in all of that scenario, your phone is broadcasting and receiving sound data that's local to that merchant, that terminal, and who you are. And that's why it's safer. That's why it's not cloud-based, and now it can pass different tokens between the phone, the store, the phone, and the terminal, and the phone, and the attendant. But that's the future of payment scenarios and consumer journey experiences that listener is enabling with merchants and clients.
It's super interesting. It does seem to be a completely different world that you're living in now, though, from when you were a brand manager for Pampers. So how did you come across this technology and get to the point where you realized, this is a company that I would like to pursue, or this is a technology I think I can build something around? What was that aha moment when you discovered this or realized that you were onto something?
Well, I think number one, I was a very, very different brand manager. I led with technology. I built with technology. So, and I wrote 3 patents at P&G that did really well. So for me, I had already decided that I was a technologist, well before listener. And when I started to think about creating a new way to connect and identify, there were some predecessors that allowed me to think about the possibility of what we were building. Shopkick in its early days, the way it was identified when you entered a store, it was an ultrasonic ID. Grace notes of the world were fingerprinting and watermarking as a method to provide you additional content. And then to even other competitors, they were around, but it was a simple ID, and the concept of data over audio hadn't technically been created. The concept of IDs over audio, the concept of synchronization over audio, had already been in the market. What we tried to do, and what when I met my co-founders, and what they led me to believe that we could build, because honestly, this story is much bigger than Rodney Williams. It includes a ton of people that were behind us and supported us and helped us, but they were the group that created this and allowed me to believe it was possible. I think what I was able to do as the leader is to just persevere and push through market adoption at different stages better than anyone else. And that's one of the things that, if you follow the story, that's really what has happened. In the beginning, we were at the beginning of that, introduction curve where the technology was in its infancy. So we're just trying to do whatever use case that anyone wants to buy, but they're buying based on the limitation of the technology, not the potential of the product. And then as awareness grows, you have to educate the market on the use case. You have to go through the challenges that we did, and then timing of the market and product will sync up. And we've always wanted to do what we do today, but the technology wasn't ready. Technology got ready really about October of last year, and then the market really, I believe, responded around January, February of this year. And then this year has been the biggest growth year we've ever had, and we're expecting that to continue next year.
Well, I'm glad to hear that for you guys. And I'd love to dive into the entrepreneurial journey for yourself. When did you decide that it was time to go full-time with Listener? Were you still working at P&G when you had started the company, or what did that transition from employee to entrepreneur look like for you?
The transition so it's interestingly enough, I mean, I had the idea for Listener the end of January. Spent February trying to figure out how was I going to bring this to life, and met my co-founder, and the idea was we're going to go out and meet some other co-founders on this competition called the Startup Bus, and that was in March. From March until August was the decision factor of me wanting to leave P&G. For me, I felt that if I could raise enough capital to support my expenses, that I was going to make the jump. And so for me, it was a simple equation. And once we received the funding that we needed, I think my last day was the end of August, and I was full-time Listener by September.
Yeah, that's really impressive, because that's a pretty quick transition from ideation to actually being able to go full-time into focusing on this. So what were your biggest fears at that point in time when you're thinking about leaving this job at a very well-known company, very well-respected company, and going out on your own and taking what a lot of people would consider a huge risk?
I think today the sentiment is a little bit different, but back in 2012, it seemed like everyone thought it was a big risk. But one of the biggest things of, I think, great entrepreneurs, and not even putting me in a great category, I just think I've learned from them, is that I think you have to have the ability to predict the future a bit, and you have to be able to see things that others can't see. For me, I saw the entrepreneurship journey, especially within technology, as the most valuable asset that would ever live on my resume. And I had done great work at P&G, and if I was to be successful building a technology company across so many different verticals, I would be exponentially more valued at any organization, big or small. And I saw that value. And I saw it immediately. I even to this day, I have never stopped receiving job offers. And it just continues to get higher and higher from the biggest organizations in the world. And I think that's what I saw. So for me, it wasn't a risk. It wasn't a risk. It was just deciding to pursue a learning journey that was going to be the biggest learning journey of my career. After we have all thought, we're supposed to have learned what we needed to learn, and we're just going to go out and work for a company for 15 years. I took another path.
I love that perspective. That's so different from the traditional view on going out and starting your own thing. Instead of it being a risk, really, it's just a huge opportunity to further develop your skill set and build your own value in ways that you couldn't in a traditional role. So that's a really cool way to frame it up. And when you made that jump, in terms of whatever you're comfortable sharing, but from an economical perspective, were you did you build up enough in your savings that you knew it could support you for X amount of time? Or was it more focused on if you can raise a certain amount of dollars, that would be looked at as part of your income, and that's what you would use both for your expenses that you mentioned earlier and for building the company? I'm always curious when somebody starts a new company, kind of how they go about looking at it from the financing of your actual life and the expenses that you still do have.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was really about just managing my expenses. I mean, I worked at P&G, and so I had savings, right? And up into funding, I had definitely spent my savings or portions of it. I think the savings conversation didn't really come into play until the next time I needed to go out and raise money, because I think we ran out of money about 15 months later. In between, us raising another round and us proving that we are deserving of that round. And that's probably when I depleted my savings again. But you know what, if I've learned anything in this process, I mean, I think that if you aren't willing to risk it all, you probably shouldn't do it. And that's perfectly okay. I just think some entrepreneurs should work for other entrepreneurs, or should do it within the safety of a big company like P&G. But if you really believe something, if you're the type of entrepreneur that I would like to invest in, I want the entrepreneur that's willing to risk it all, because that makes me believe that they're going to figure it out. And I think this journey is much more about figuring things out than knowing things.
And if you could go back in time and talk to Rodney in 2012, right in January when you were coming up with that idea for Listener, is there one piece of advice based on all that you've learned over the course of the past 6 years or so that you would give to yourself just when you were getting started, just when you were coming up with the idea?
I don't know. I think that I would have spent more time in the beginning learning how to be a better manager. I think I would learn how to be a bit more organized, be more focused on culture, and making sure everyone's a bit happy. My natural instance, especially coming out of P&G, was, you be relentless and you got to go after it. That's tiring, and that can be taxing, especially on a team. So if there's anything, that's probably what I would tell myself, to try to learn more sooner. But that's about it.
And is there any advice for the aspiring entrepreneurs who are listening to this podcast now? Is there anything else that you would like to share with them, or any insight that you would like to give them when they're thinking about going out and starting their own businesses? It's back to that kind of main point. I think if you really want to do something, you got to be willing to do it. And a lot of things in this life you can't do 50% or half strength. And starting a company is definitely not one of those things, right? I think if you got to go cut the yard, I think you can go do a half-ass job. I think if you're gonna go do something else, you can do it half. But I think when you're trying to build something that has never been built, or an innovation that you've discovered, or an idea that you believe could affect a number of people, and then you start to recruit a number of people, and then you're starting to have investors, you really have to be willing to go after it with every fiber that you can control. And the times that I see things go left, sometimes it's that. I think the other times it's entrepreneurs is sometimes like inability to learn and grow and change, and I think that's really, really important. I don't think this is a stubborn profession. I think you got to be stubborn about certain things, like your dream, but how you get to your dream, I think you have to be completely open to every single possible option. I just think those are really important. And then finally, I think entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, you got to remove all emotion. And what I mean emotional passion and going after it is the emotion. That's the good emotion. But
sometimes emotion can get in the way of logical data, and like it's about making decisions based on quantitative results versus qualitative. And the more you can get on a fact-based type of leadership, and rationale and strategy, I think the more you'll be able to go out and win, ultimately.
Is that how you started with your entrepreneurial career, having that ability to make decisions based on the quantitative data versus the qualitative, or was there a point where you had to shift your thinking to more align with that type of thinking?
I think P&G taught me to make decisions based on facts and data. That's definitely something I learned there. I think the emotional part, when you're building something yourself, you tend to, there is no data when you're starting a concept, right? Like it's pretty much something you thought of, and you got to find data support it. So when you're starting something, you move away from, and you move towards this more emotional place. I think that I forgot about it at times while a listener, and I had to relearn it. And you got to relearn it really quickly, because you will start to notice that you're hiring based off emotion. You are responding to questions based off emotions. When things don't go positive, and whether it's negative, or you feel defensive, you tend to respond emotional. And I, once I saw that that's what was happening, and that it was also being destructive to what I was building, to what we were building, I think that was the next step, was to try to figure out how to remove the emotion from the equation, and have some clarity and thought and next steps.
That makes a lot of sense. And were there any specific tools or techniques that you were able to leverage to make it a more data-driven decision and less emotional? Or is that just something that you had to be more cognizant of?
I think you just got to be more cognizant of it. I think you got to be more cognizant. But your emotion, if there's anything that is not talked about enough, is the emotional intelligence that's required to continue building something like this, and it's going to require a significant growth in whatever level you are at. You're managing people older than you, younger than you, smarter than you. You have investors that have different agendas, different perspectives, different experience. You are balancing what you believe to what you see, and how you feel with what really is or isn't. And then you are sacrificing a lot, whether that's actual dollars, time away from family, time from support, and the emotional aspect is really what I think defeats some entrepreneurs versus what allows them to win. And I don't think a lot of folks talk about that enough, or as much as required, because I think it feels, in my experience, to be the number one reason why things may or may not work out as planned. But yeah.
That is super insightful, and everything you've shared today has been really helpful for me to understand it, and very educational. And I know that the listeners are really going to enjoy this. Is there anywhere people can go that you point them to learn more about yourself, or more about Listener, or to connect with you?
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm Rodney B. Williams, or Twitter, anywhere else. I would suggest you do. I mean, I try to give nuggets every chance I get. My entire journey is on my Instagram, literally my first listener meeting till now. Which you can actually see how I've grown. But more importantly, I think it's important to know how much you will have to grow if you want to go out and do any type of similar thing.
That's very cool. And we'll have all that linked up in the show notes. Rodney, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us today. It's been very educational for me, and I'm excited to be able to share this one with the Millennial Mastermind community. So much appreciated.
Awesome. Nah, thank you.